All to the New York City Transit and Bus Committee meeting for December. Mr. Marino, are there any members of the public who have registered and are ready to speak?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. We have 11 public speakers this morning. The first speaker is Jason Pinheiro, who will be followed by Kathleen Collins.
Good morning. Good morning, Andy Byford. Good morning, Polly. And good morning to the rest of the board and the media, of course, that should be observing my speech. It is totally unacceptable that yesterday a commuter broke the glass on one of the holiday train cars. That person should have been arrested on site because this is public property and this shouldn't have been going on. And Andy, I know that you're aware of this, but we have been seeing a spike recently on trains having their brakes automatically activated. And this is happening more than once per day in every single subway line. And especially, when are the tracks going to be clean without any signals of rats like we are seeing in some station booths? When are we going to see our subway system clean and be in the 21st century? And one last note, when I was doing the station tour at 145th Street on the 3 line, I saw a handful of people doing fare evasion in front of the station agent's face. When Chief Edward De La Torre is going to put more police in our subway stations? When are we going to see more enforcement of the law in our subway stations? I hope that this will resolve the crisis that we have and we won't have to face another fare increase, because this is getting ridiculously stupid. So that's all I have to say for this month.
Thank you, Mr. Pinheiro. The next speaker is Kathleen Collins, who will be followed by Murray Bowden.
Good morning. I've been a rider of excessive ride now for approximately 3 years, and I have seen some improvement, especially I know that every ride can't be a perfect ride, and that we have to deal with such things as gridlock and traffic and flat tires. And I had that happen to me on this past Thursday, where the car that was to pick me up had a flat tire, and it worked out okay because I had called up the brokerage people, and I told them that I would be going to stay inside because it was so cold out. And so they called up the driver, he called me, and then later on he called me and told he had a flat tire. And we kept in communication, which was great, so I could stay inside in a warm area until he came. And when he came, he called me, and I was able to go out. He met me, and everything worked well. And I loved that we had communication, which was great. I do have a couple of safety concerns. One is with many of the SUVs that have been picking me up with the brokerage people, the vehicles don't have seat belts and shoulder belts, many of them. A few of them do, but many of them don't. And I ask for the seat belt and shoulder belt, and they say no seat belt, no shoulder belt. And many of these drivers do not have a working knowledge of English. So it's difficult to speak to them when you have a question or when you need them to fasten something. So that's another safety concern I have found with that. And another issue I have found that some of these drivers are not getting paid on a reasonable basis. I had one driver where he told me he hadn't been paid for 6 weeks. And I think that's terrible. And then I saw him about a week later, and he told me, well, he got paid about 3 weeks' worth, and they were still 3 weeks behind. And he was a family man. He had a wife, kids. His wife worked, too. And I think that's awful because, I mean, they have to think about things. Thank you, and have a good day. And just expand on demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. The next speaker is Murray Bowden, who will be followed by Lisa Daglian.
Good morning. My handicap is that I cannot hear as well as other people, And unless you turn on your microphone to speak, I can't hear you. In order to change the culture of how the MTA operates, it would be helpful if each of you addressed each other by the first name. It would change the way things flow here. You all need to know each other anyhow, so you might as well use first names. One of the biggest problems in the closure of the tunnel will be traffic. Both New York City and New York State do not put the correct road lines on the roads. I've spoken about it many, many times. Nobody seems to take responsibility for correcting it. The Port Authority has a new chief traffic engineer who I met with and is the most knowledgeable, I can't keep my words straight anymore, is the most knowledgeable traffic engineer I have ever met. He knows how to solve all of these problems legally and correctly, as does the law person in the New York City DOT office, Susan. They both know how to do it. All changes will be done legally, and it can be done quickly. And the manual is out of date, and they know it. If you want traffic to move faster when the tunnel shut down, you need to start now and put lines on the road that the driver understands. The driver is not paying attention anymore. He's looking at his text. You all know when the traffic light turns green, the car in front of you sits there because he's doing his text. And when you honk the horn, he finally moves. There needs to be major changes to meet the budget projections. It starts with the very small things that have been ignored for too long.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. The next speaker is Lisa Daglian, who will be followed by Joe Rappaport.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Daglian, the Executive Director for the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. While we're starting to see improvements in New York City's transit system as a result of investment from the Subway Action Plan, clearly there's a lot more that needs to be done. The system is still recovering from the 2010 cuts, which is the reason that we continue our call for no service cuts in light of any fare increases. And while the proposed fare increases will help with the budget gap, substantially more funding is needed to get the system back on track and also ensure that it is accessible for all the riders. City and the state stepped up to fund Subway Action Plan. We need the city and the state to both step up and fund the Fast Forward program. We also need some bold new thinking for looking at increased revenues, such as might come from Amazon. I know I keep saying that because it's still true. And we also continue to strongly support looking at different ways that we can capture added value from development, not just in New York City, but across all of the different operating systems. So at the end of the day, as you all know, it's in the best interest that both the city and the state ensure that the system functions well. And we will continue to work with you and beat the drum for city and state funding for the transit system to address all the needs.
Thank you. The next speaker is Joe Rappaport, who will be followed by Valerie Joseph.
My name is Joe Rappaport. I'm the Executive Director of the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled, and we're a member of ARG, the Accessoride Reform Group. Think frustration. We're here because the budget, which you'll be considering, must include enough funding to expand, to keep going with e-hail and expand e-hail and on-demand services. We've asked for budget details, and we haven't seen some of them, but these programs work. In previous testimony, participants have called them life-changing and revolutionary. It's rare, as you know, that an MTA program gets that kind of praise. This is a wise use of funds, even in the face of a tight budget. You get better service for for tens of thousands of people. You turn around a universally despised program. And you show that you can make major programs in our transit system much better. There's an argument that these programs cost more, even though the per ride cost is less. I think that the MTA may have some problems making that argument. After all, the MTA funded the Enhanced Station Initiative without any elevators. Now, there are different budgets, capital versus operating, but the cost savings on the operating side, on the capital side, could be significant. So I'm urging you to look at the accessorized budget as part of a whole, not in a vacuum. Thank you. I also want to wish Ira Greenberg good luck and thank you for your work on accessibility and so many other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Rappaport. The next speaker is Valerie Joseph, who will be followed by Jose Hernandez.
Good morning, MTA board members. My name is Valerie Joseph. I'm from the Brooklyn Center for the Independence of the Disabled. I am here to talk about the on-demand service. I used it now for a year and some months, and I love it. I can say that it has changed my life, both being at work and on a personal level. I'd like you to expand it to everybody else who's on that waiting list that is calling me day and night. When am I going to be able to be on this list? When am I going to be able to be on this list? I have a life too, and I'd like to be in the same position as you. I urge you to please, please find it in the budget to do this as soon as possible, because you have tons of people who are waiting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. The next speaker is Jose Hernandez, who will be followed by Jessica De La Rosa.
Hello, my name is Jose Hernandez. I am an employee of United Spinal Association. I would like to first thank President Byford and Alex L. Guten for your dedication in making the system a lot friendly and a lot more accessible for the disabled. I also want to advocate for the expansion of the eHail Curb program. It's life-changing. The system, as it stands right now, is not as accessible as we would like it to be. And the curb system gives us the opportunity to be a lot more productive members of society. We can get places, go to appointments, and actually go to work and get there on time. So the MTA is going to get also some additional funding from the congested pricing, I think, beginning in January. So I hope that some of those funds are going to be redirected and used to expand and include the curb program into the next coming budget. Also, the access-rated program could be restructured so that it can also be a lot more effective in getting individuals with disabilities around. So that's basically what I have to say. And again, thank you, President Byford and Alex, for all your hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. The next speaker is Jessica De La Rosa, who will be followed by David Vieser.
Hi, good morning. So I've been using Curb for about a year, like Valerie now, and it has definitely, I've come up here before and say how much it has absolutely changed my life and gave me independence. For an example, last week, Monday, I think it was, a week ago today, my service dog got really sick, and she was actually bleeding. And I was able to take her to the animal medical center to have her treated and not have to think about, oh my God, I need to book it, because that's not gonna work, right? So I was able to hop in a cab and make sure that my dog was okay. So it for emergency situations like that, it is amazing. I don't have to rely on Access-a-Ride or the bus or the inaccessible subways, which are a pain in the butt. But I think it should be expanded too, definitely, because it's been so wonderful to me. I think that it should help others in the same way and not have like the same struggles that, you know, most people have getting around in the subway system. So yes, I think it should be expanded. It has been a blessing to me and the rest of us here who use it. And thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is David Vieser, who will be followed by Luth Rowenkron.
Good morning, Mr. Byford and board members. Sorry, first time doing this. Just your average rider from the Upper West Side, but I do want to point out some things that I think you all need to pay attention to, perhaps. The TVM machines are so old that when you put a debit card in and you make the mistake of writing the wrong PIN or the wrong zip code, it takes your money for 72 hours. It's not the banks doing it. It is your programming that does not allow the release of funds. This might be fine for people with credit cards, but for the those on limited incomes, on fixed incomes, you are taking away as much as $117 if they're buying a monthly ticket for 3 days. This is an inexcusable situation, and one you probably were not aware of. But it is happening. For me, I do weekly. So if I make a mistake and hit the wrong zip code, which is easy to do with the buttons there, you will lose $32 for 72 hours until the bank will release. What happens is you guys put it in before people put in the zip code or the PIN. And that's sort of backwards in today's world. But back in 1995 or whenever those were built, that was the way things were done. But the programming has not been switched, and it's really a hardship for many people. So please, if you can look at this, you're going to help out a lot of folks who are struggling with income. And my other question are transfers, bus to subway. This is something that you don't have, yet you have subway to bus. And again, you're dealing with people who may be paying on the bus and going to a subway stop. Why do we have transfers that only go bus to bus and subway to bus, but we don't have bus to subway? You are all one group. You're one committee here right now. Why is this the case? And why can't that be changed to help those of us, again, who are on a fixed income? I thank you for your time and for your work.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ruth Lowenkron, who will be followed by Omar Vera.
Good morning. Thank you. Ruth Lowenkron. I'm the director of the Disability Justice Program at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. We, too, are members of ARG, the Accessoride Reform Group, and I'm here to talk about Accessoride. As others have mentioned, the word on the street is life-changing. And again, as Joe Rappaport said, where do you hear that? Please bear that in mind as you are thinking about the funding. You are taking care of a program that has been problematic from its inception. Not only that you had to plan in advance for your ride and no flexibility, which no other person has to do, but you had folks, and you still have, for those who are not lucky enough to be part of the pilot program, you have the circuitous routes, the endless delays, the no-shows, the unavailability of discounts for just that person's part of the population. So you have a system that is in bad shape, and now you have this wonderful pilot program. There is only one direction to go, and that is to make it permanent, to extend it to everybody, and most critically, not to have any caps on the services. Can you imagine if you have improved some of the woes of the subway and thereby have increased ridership, and then you say, oh, gotcha. Now we're going to pull back and we're going to cap the number of rides that you are allowed to take on that subway. Nobody would stand for it, and the disability community is not going to stand for it either. You've finally improved a problematic system. We cannot take a step backward, and we must go forward, both for the e-hails as well as for the pilot program. And I'll just say that it's a great irony because, as you all know, each individual ride that is an e-hail ride or part of the pilot is much, much, much cheaper. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lowenkron. The next speaker is Omar Vera.
Greetings, MTA Board's Transit and Bus Committee. Welcome to the last edition of 2018 of your meeting. And first, let me congratulate soon-to-be Judge Ira Greenberg for his new position. I know you'll do great. I know you'll do great in Queens. We're with you the whole way. Make sure you uphold the law, protect everyone's rights. That's the way to do it. Second, I'd like to also congratulate President Andy Byford on his first year. Almost like next month will be 1 year since he first arrived here. but this is around the time he accepted the position and was basically leaving the TTC in Toronto. I know everybody there is proud of you, of your achievements here since, but let's move forward with fast forward, top to bottom, modernization of the system. Okay, with that said, we also have to discuss a few more things. For starters, I mentioned this last week at the Finance Committee special meeting, but these biannual fare and toll changes it's not sustainable. Like, it has, at some point, there's got to be some stability. I'll mention more over there, and as well as the meeting this afternoon in Brooklyn, Long Island University. I heard the public hearing today. I also like to further see that if there's any more like station enhancements, like the ones the governor has proposed, we should consider having elevators in those, because that's the big criticism of the ESIs, that none of them have accessibility elevators. I'm like, wow. But thank you for further moving us forward. And with that said, I'll yield back the balance of my time because I have more to discuss this afternoon. So I'll yield the floor to all of you. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Vera. That was the last public speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The minutes of the November meeting are in the board book. May I have a motion to approve? Second? All in favor? The minutes are approved. Thank you. Mr. Mulligan, are there any changes in the work plan?
No changes, Chairman.
Then I'd like to ask President Byford to begin making his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. So you've seen my comments in the book. I think that gives you, as ever, hopefully a flavour of what I think are the important topics at the moment. I make reference, obviously, to the big push on fast forward in terms of getting the funding. That will be a major focus of my team and I through the spring. I also talk in there about the ongoing push on performance, the criticality of getting the L project right, and also the final stages of completing the 7 rollout the CBTC rollout on line 7. And to that end, just to reiterate, I'm very proud to be able to announce that Pete Tomlin, who is a world expert in signaling, subway re-signaling, will be joining us mid-January. So I very much look forward to having him join us. Consistent with what was, as ever, insightful comments from the speakers, and a couple of them made reference to further work to do on customer improvements, but also a number of them made reference to further work to do on what you might call reliability, and also a reflection on what we've achieved so far. And also because I think it's good practice at the end of a year to just take a brief look back at what's been done. I thought, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence and that of the board, I would just spend 5 minutes just giving my views, really, or observations on what we have done over the past 12 months. So I'll rattle through it very quickly. January, obviously, as Omar mentioned, was when we came together as a team. We set out immediately what the 4 priorities of that team would be, that they would be to transform the subway, to focus all out on immediate improvements to the subway, and subsequently to build a case for its complete modernization. To do the same for buses, to arrest that depressing decline in ridership, and to tackle the root causes of why people are migrating away from the buses, and to reverse that. To push on, unashamedly, push on as fast as we can to make this system fully accessible. We can't be proud of the system until and unless it is fully accessible. And then the 4th equal priority, which again has informed what we've been doing, has been to focus on our people, because anyone can buy new infrastructure. You've got to take people with you, and you've got to harness and harvest the passion and the professionalism and the capabilities of your workforce in order to truly be world class. So everything that we have done in the past 11 months since we came together as a team has been with those 4 equal priorities in mind. In February, we began work on the first of the town halls in conjunction with Commissioner Trottenberg on the L project. So obviously that's a big issue for next year, and we began those town halls to really get people across the detail of what we're doing and to begin the glide path towards not only finalizing the plan, which we now have, but also to refining it and making sure that it is robust. In February also, I made reference to the fact that really as an observation from my first meeting in the preceding month in January, we needed to focus more on root cause, and that I was uncomfortable with the way that data was being presented. So in that very first, my second meeting, but the first, having seen what happened in the January meeting, we revised the board book. And the board book, I hope commissioners would agree, has been progressively refined, and the work's not complete, but progressively refined to give you more intelligent data, to give you more analysis, and to show that we are serious about improvement through data, through not anecdote, although anecdote can be useful, but by drilling down into what are the root causes and addressing them and applying appropriate remedies. In March, we appointed, although she'd been working here for a little while, we formalized Sarah's appointment as the first ever Chief Customer Officer for New York City Transit. And in that first month, getting straight off and down to business, showing that we were serious about customer improvement, we had held the first of what's now been a series of Twitter chats. In April, building upon what we did in February, where we said we flagged that we needed to, we would come back to the board with revised methodologies around delay attribution. Under Sally's leadership, we revised the delay categories, but also the way that we collated data, the way that we present it, and the way that we were going about tackling the delays that data described. We launched, or we trialed the double-decker bus on Staten Island, and under Darrell's leadership, we launched the bus action plan to wide acclaim, the bus action plan being the precursor of what subsequently was 1/4 of the Fast Forward plan. I also remember doing a ride-along with ARG, funnily enough, which was very insightful for me because I saw firsthand some of the challenges faced by our accessibility or our disabled customers. So that was very insightful. In May, which was obviously a big month for us, we launched the Fast Forward plan. That was done within 100 working days of us coming together as a team. That plan was launched to great acclaim. It did capture people's imagination. I think it's still the talk of the town. Obviously, launching it is one thing, getting the funding for it is another, but it deliberately focused not just on the long term, on the 5-year plan and the 10-year plan, important though those things are, it also targeted immediate improvements, and again, those are what we have been working on since. In May also, I confirmed Sally Librera as the first senior vice president, first female senior vice president ever to head up the subway, and I was also proud to announce the appointment of Frank Giesecke as our chief operating officer, my dream team, and the people that really are getting stuck into just getting the existing system working better while we push on with the further improvements that need to be made. In June, turning my attention now to disability and accessibility issues, we appointed Alex Elagudin as the MTA's first ever accessibility advisor. And Alex, I think it's no exaggeration to say that you've made a tremendous difference. I was asked just on last Friday by a member of the media, how's it been? I said, I don't know how the MTA ever managed without an accessibility advisor as a concept and without you as a valued member of my team. It wasn't all good news in June. That was, of course, when we had the problems with the ceiling at Borough Hall, where, funnily enough, I was this morning. But that steeled our resolve as a team to push on and get the funding that was required for the Fast Forward plan, because that, in a way, was typical of what needed to be done. In July, which marked 1 year of the Subway Action Plan, we not only launched the customer commitment, Sarah launched the first of our customer commitments, a very bold statement to say that we're serious about improving the customer experience, so serious about it that we will put our name to targeted, time-bound, specific commitments that you can hold us accountable for. But in that same month, I also challenged my team on the anniversary of the SAP. I challenged my team to come up with programs that would deliver by year-end an ongoing delay incident reduction of 10,000 delay incidents per month. In August, we launched the revised Staten Island bus network, something that we're still working to refine. We held our first ever Fast Forward town hall. That's one of many that we've now held. The idea of that being to syndicate, socialize New Yorkers with what the plan is, what it's about, get their questions, get their feedback. We also, following on from that delay challenge that I set Sally and her team, Sally initiated what we will, I'm sure, talk about today, which is the Save Safe Seconds campaign, which is an all-out focus on basics of operation, on dwell times, on schedules, on departure ex termini, and on other things that you just have to get right if you are to run a punctual subway. So it's very topical, and I won't steal Sally's thunder, but just the stories that we have today about the work we've done on signalling is indicative, or it's a product of that Save Safe Seconds campaign. And I'm proud to say that the architects of the work we've done to revise speed restrictions and to safely, and I stress that word, safely get the maximum capability out of the existing signalling system. The architects of those plans are here today, including Barry Greenblatt, who's the VP in charge of the Rail Control Center, and also Phil Dominguez, who's one of our train service supervisors, whose relentless work in literally driving a train around every single inch of our subway network has resulted in the improvements that we're beginning to see rolled out today. In September, we launched our new group station manager model. That is a fundamental, radical new way of running stations. People have said, oh, we used to have that. Not in this format, we didn't. These are accountable managers, named managers who have accountability, crystal clear accountability, to deliver improvements both in terms of customer service and in maintenance of our stations across the whole of the network. In October, we were proud to present the best operating statistics for 3 years on weekdays, the best operating statistics for 4 years on weekends. We had the 60 Minutes program, which I think graphically showed the challenge that remains and the miracle workers that are out there on the system operating 100-year-old equipment. November, we announced the appointment of, or the incoming appointment of a signalling expert, Pete Tomlin, to take forward our CBTC program, the program that will be transformative. And in December, just this morning, in fact, we have announced that, those improvements in railway operating speeds that I'll let Sally talk about. Nearly done. So what does this all mean? Well, it shows that there is a science and a plan behind everything that we're doing. Everything is linked to those 4 priorities. And obviously, you know, every day brings its own challenges, but we have not swayed from progressing and prosecuting those 4 priorities. We have been laying foundations for Fast Forward, but getting immediately stuck into tangible improvements right now to improve the customer's experience. And I'll just cite 5, and then I'll throw to questions. Number 1, I think in 11 months, we now have a far greater understanding of root cause. And because we have that greater understanding of root cause, we have assigned meaningful programs and actions to address those root causes of delay. And that, in addition to the existing subway action plan, we now, as I've said earlier, have the bus action plan. We have the Save Safe Seconds campaign, which derived from the 10,000 delay incident reduction challenge that I set Sally and the team. We have our ongoing Back to Basics campaign, and we have the work on speed. And I should also shout out the Performance Analysis Unit, who really helped us put together those initiatives. And those meaningful programs have themselves then led to improved operating statistics, because we're tackling things that could and should have probably been done a long time ago. No-brainers, things that actually don't necessarily cost very much, but just, I hope, demonstrate greater attention to detail. The second thing that I would say we've achieved in 11 months, we are well advanced with a restructure of New York City Transit into being a customer-led organization with the right people, with the right skill sets, in the right organization with the right mandate, and more to come on that as the new year rolls out. Number 3, we have an unprecedented focus on and a commitment to the accessibility cause. That's demonstrated graphically personified by Alex, the work we've done on the survey of the remaining stations, what it will cost to make them accessible, and all of the Fast Forward initiatives, but also the immediate improvements that Alex has been driving. Number 4, an increasing focus on our people. We've appointed Deb as our Chief People Officer. We've brought in some new talent, but we've also promoted from within. And the aim has been to just raise the caliber of our managerial team. We've also been working on, and it's still a work in progress, changing the way we performance manage people. I don't like the word discipline. I think we need to continue to do that work in terms of focusing on the difference between capability and conduct. So more on that to come. We're also going to look at better ways to reward and recognize the many excellent people out there. And finally, I think the biggest achievement really would be that we've now got a plan. It's well received. It's increasingly well known. We are developing plans to ensure its success, and that's about success when we go to Albany in the spring and City Hall in the summer and Washington whenever they want to receive us to get the funds for Fast Forward. What I would say, and this was meant to be merely a reflection, a look back upon the year. It's not meant to be in any way self-congratulatory. It's just saying, here's a reprise of the year. The reason I've done that is because I wanted to say this, that the job is clearly nowhere near done, but I believe that we have made good progress. We have much more to do on reliability. I am crystal clear, as is my team, that when it comes to the crunch, safe, reliable service is job one. That comes before cleanliness, information. We want to do all those things as well, but job one is getting people from A to B safely and quickly. So more to do on reliability, more to do on the cost base, more to do on structure and processes. And clearly, we've got to win that battle in the spring to get Fast Forward funding. So I would like to just end by thanking the board for their support, for customers, for their patience, and ultimately, though, to the 50,000 men and women of transit, my colleagues, for a fabulous first great year together. We know that there's more to do, and we're determined to deliver. Thank you.
Thank you, President Byford. Before we go to the subway operating report, are there any questions for him? Good, it was clear. Since there are none, I'll ask Senior Vice President Librera to make her report.
Good morning. The November metrics show continued progress that we're making in terms of improving subway performance. For the third consecutive month, we met the delay reduction target. That means that our monthly total of delays came in more than 10,000 delays below the baseline average, which was based on the first half of 2018. On-time performance, service delivered, additional train time, and customer journey time performance all improved year over year. As we've mentioned in recent months, we know that we have more to do, but we are encouraged by the progress we see in these metrics. And we continue our comprehensive efforts under Subway Action Plan, Fast Forward, and Save Safe Seconds initiatives as we work toward continued progress. There were 67 major incidents in the month of November, which is a higher number than we've experienced in recent months, and also a higher number than we had in November of 17. There were two main drivers to this rise in incidents in the month. The first was the significant snowstorm that we had on November 15th. The subway system, as you all know, kept moving that day. We were able to move people where they needed to go, and we ran close to normal service. But we did have incidents that were caused by the heavy rate of snowfall during the storm, and also our somewhat diminished ability to get to those incidents in a quick way because of some of the surface level conditions on the roads. The other piece, though, that we see in the metrics for the major incidents that's weather related is the fact that our trains just traveled more slowly during the storm. And this is something that we consistently see when we have inclement weather, that we will incur major incidents because our trains are operating more slowly, maybe visibility is diminished, or we're allowing longer dwell times for people to use caution boarding and alighting the trains, which is of course what we want. So our team is looking at the major incident statistic and seeing if there's a way that we can better represent inclement weather related incidents to give you better indication of those incidents that are caused by equipment problems, response problems, or just slower operating speed. So more to follow on that in the coming months. There was also an unusually high number of incidents, major incidents this month that involved persons on the right of way, persons on the track. And of particular concern is a recent a recent trend we're seeing with respect to customers surfing on the outside of trains and actually getting down onto the track and fleeing through the track or through the tunnel. This is incredibly dangerous, as I know you all know, and also very disruptive to service. Oftentimes we have to remove power. It's not uncommon that an incident like this can delay tens of thousands of riders. We're working closely with NYPD to pursue individuals who are engaging in this reckless behavior, and certainly working to manage the impacts of these incidents as they do occur. So as we've been discussing in recent months, we're working to improve our baseline normal operations of service by looking for ways that we can safely improve train speeds. As I think you've probably seen in the news today, we have made some significant progress through a focused, coordinated effort that Andy mentioned earlier between our planning team, our operations planning team, service delivery, and our engineering teams. Those teams are out testing all of the signals in the system to do many things. I'll highlight a couple. The first is to test the grade time signals in the system. Those are the signals that will turn red and essentially stop a train if a train is moving too fast. What we have found is that in some cases those signals aren't properly calibrated, meaning they're not allowing train operators to travel at the speed that they're designed to operate at. So what we've done is we've made 30 changes to those signals that we've found to be out of calibration, which is essentially enabling our train operators to safely operate at higher speeds in the system. That team has also been looking at where in the system we have posted speed limits that could be increased, again, safely. To date, they've identified 34 locations that can be where we can safely increase the posted speed limit, and those 34 locations have already been approved, vetted and approved through our safety and engineering review. So this last weekend, we installed signage at the first 5 locations of those 34 locations on the 4th Avenue line near 36th Street and 59th Street. And we expect that customers will feel the difference as trains are traveling more quickly through those areas. Again, all through safe operations. We're going to continue to roll out changes that we're making to the newly calibrated grade time signals, and also these improved or increased speed limit postings throughout the system over the coming weeks and months. We're very proud of this work, and we look forward to continuing it. I'd like to remind everyone that we are offering vintage holiday train rides once again this year, Sundays in December, 125th Street along the 8th Avenue line down to 2nd Ave at Houston. And finally, I would like to join Andy in thanking all Subway's employees for their hard work and dedication over the course of 2018. And on behalf of the entire team, say that we look forward to 2019, and we look forward to continuing service improvements for our customers. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Librera? Mr. Albert.
Thanks for that, Sally. So looking at the legacy indicators, there's marked improvement in the terminal on-time performance of 1, 2, 4, and 5 lines. Is that a result of recalibrating the schedules to make them more accurately reflect running times, or is it work done by the Subway Action Plan, or a combination thereof?
It's definitely a combination. Certainly, we saw we made significant changes to schedules on the 2, 3, and 4, 5 lines around the December to January timeframe for 18. But those schedule changes also enable us to run a more precise operation with respect to how we're dispatching trains, with respect to how we're merging trains, and with respect to how we're managing the dwell times along those lines. So it is a combination of things, and certainly as we continue to do the work that we have initiated across the board through Subway Action Plan and through Save Seconds and Fast Forward, we expect to see those improvements continue.
I mean, while most riders do not ride terminal to terminal, this is absolutely good news, and please keep it up.
Thank you.
I think they'll want to play your comments just now on an endless loop. Anyone else? Mr. Greenberg.
Yes, in the newest, the journey time performance line by line indicators. The J to C seems to be having some issues, and of course there's the 7 line. But I just wonder if is this some specific problem about the J to C? I'm kind of familiar with the 7, but I'd love to hear a comment about how we're going to get things up to speed there too.
Mm-hmm. We've been doing station work along the J to Z line, which has created some slower speeds on both tracks as we've been working through those projects. As those projects are wrapping up, we are certainly looking to see the improved statistics, and we're also focusing in on terminal management with the dispatchers along the line as well.
And on the 7 line with CBTC, I mean, it's all implemented now, but I see nothing but complaints from people. I don't know when we're going to go into full operation on that. That'd be interesting to know. And that most of the complaints I receive actually happen to come from my son, who's now avoiding the line.
So we did on Thanksgiving weekend have the final cutover for the 7 line, meaning the entire 7 line is now under CBT signaling. However, the project is not yet complete. We have some known technical issues that we are working with the vendor to address. We have some solutions that we've already implemented that are temporary solutions, and we have other solutions that are planned for future software upgrades. We continue to work closely through those issues. The complete CBTC doesn't come until we get automatic train operation, which isn't for another several months into 2019. That's where we will see even further improvements in service because of the more regular, consistent service that we'll be seeing along the line. We have had, unfortunately, a number of incidents that aren't CBTC related that all lined up, unfortunately, following the last cutover, and certainly inconvenienced our signal riders, our 7 riders. We had a very disruptive 12-9 or a case of a passenger being hit by a train at Willets Point. We had a track circuit failure that was not related to the CBTC system, and we also had a switch issue at Main Street, all in that same week following the last cutover, along with some CBTC teething issues. So we recognize the 7 line customers aren't getting the service that they deserve yet, but we are certainly working on it around the clock with our full team, and we are looking for significant improvements very shortly.
Ms. Vanterpool, then Mr. Merdler.
Sally, prior to your tenure at Transit in May 2017, the MTA had announced a 6-point plan to address a variety of different things. And one of those points was how to better mitigate and address sick and injured customers in the system. And I see that they still comprise a good chunk of the delays that we're seeing on a weekday basis. Can you talk a little bit about how that 1 point may have had an impact so far? Are we still moving forward with that 6-point plan under the SAP? And whether we've seen an improvement since May 27 when those points were unveiled, but particularly just on the sick and injured customers?
Yeah. The 6-point plan really grew into the subway action plan, and those elements were essentially absorbed into the subway action plan. One of those subway action plan elements, which originated with the 6-point plan, as you mentioned, was a program where we station EMTs at strategic locations in the system to essentially intervene and address issues with sick passengers in a way that helps the passenger, but also helps move service. And what we've seen is that where we have those EMTs in place, we have seen a difference. We have seen a quicker resolution of those incidents. And we continue to analyze that data and look to see where those EMTs are best stationed. That said, we continue to have issues with sick passengers in the system. They are common, and they can be very disruptive depending on when they happen and where they happen. Our crews are trained to handle situations differently depending on the situation. In some cases, it may make sense to to have a train wait for an EMT or medical personnel if they're not there. In other cases, it may make sense for the train to meet EMTs or medical personnel along the line. So more and more, we're looking at those strategies. We're analyzing each of those incidents after the fact, and we're looking at how we can make some improvements.
If I may follow up with a brief question, those strategies as existed have not been significantly modified in the subway action plan. They've just been incorporated, meaning certain elements of those strategies have not been eliminated or neglected, for lack of a better word, but rather incorporated, as you said, fully as originally intended in that 6-point plan into the SAP?
Yes.
Mr. Merdler.
I have two questions, if I may. A significant portion of the cost of the proposed subway action plan, or fast forward, involves the replacement of wiring for the signals. And my question is, have you given thought to bifurcating that plan so that we replace those wires that are in dreadful shape, and then secondarily look at those that are not in that same shape, so as perhaps to phase the cost a little better?
Yes. One of the things that we've been doing in the subway action plan efforts across the board is applying what we call reliability-based maintenance, which it means that we make decisions about investments and decisions about priorities in terms of timing of work based on where we think there's the greatest need. That could be in terms of the condition of the asset, and it could be in terms of the performance of the asset, and it also could be in terms of the location of the asset. Even an asset that's performing pretty well, if we know that it's in a location where if it were to fail, it would cause a very significant issue or significant disruption along the line, then we're going to put that into that same category. And we're making phasing and priority decisions based on those analyses.
Well done. Second, you referred to the people who surf on the top of the trains, people who are down on the tracks and the like. Let me ask you a question that Commissioner Jones and I have been asking over and over again. Where are we on platform doors?
Take that, Commissioner. I'll reiterate what I've previously said. I would love to click my fingers and have platform screen doors across the whole system, but A, it would take years and billions of dollars to achieve, and B, this will be a very, very tough subway to retrofit for a number of reasons. Number one, the doors themselves are heavy, and almost certainly a lot of our platforms would have to be completely reconstructed in order to support the weight. Number two, a lot of our platforms are quite narrow in terms of width, and the doors themselves obviously consume some of that available width, so you'd have even less space in order to be able to fit the doors. Number three, the doors themselves can have a real impact upon the movement of air. So you would have to evaluate what the movement of air, what the impact would be, well, obviously for underground stations. It's not insurmountable, but you'd have to do that. Number four, a lot of our stations, I'm thinking of places like Union Square, have quite pronounced curves, and fitting platform screen doors is exponentially more difficult to fit doors. But having said that, I understand the benefits. I certainly think that going forward, where we have new build, where a platform does not suffer from any of those deficiencies or disadvantages, we should be looking to fit platform screen doors. It's easier to have platform screen door operation when you have ATO, because you need the train to line up very accurately with the doors. Albeit, the way you design it is to have the platform screen doors, the doors themselves are wider than the train doors, so you can have a bit of tolerance, but you still need very accurate stopping. So in the short term, I think the best we can do is more education, more enforcement, more evaluation of technologies, such as there are technologies to determine or immediately to detect if someone has breached the platform, if someone's gone onto the track, if they're leaning over the track. There are radar solutions that you can apply to that. But screen doors, that is not something that can be very quickly or cheaply or easily done to an old system like ours.
Mr. Chairman, let me just add a comment. I'm not suggesting that you can, by a snap of a finger, implement the process across the system. Nor am I even suggesting that you can implement it 10% of the time. What I'm suggesting, what I'm questioning is, under the inspired leadership of Darrell Irick, we had put in the budget a specific proposal to do a test in exactly the kind of an area that you contemplated, namely new subway work at Canarsie. And you removed that. And my question is, when are we going to have a pilot?
Okay, yep, I did remove that. You're absolutely right, Commissioner. I removed it because I don't think it would have taught us anything, and I thought there was better use of that funding, namely to provide and make an additional station accessible, which is a known advantage straight away, while we had the Canarsie line tunnel work ongoing. So I stand by that decision. I sought input for that decision. That decision to not proceed with a trial on what is not new build, it's still an existing station, albeit a straight line, would not really have certainly given me any further insight to what I already know. I don't think we need a trial. What we need is billions of dollars and solutions for the to overcome the impediments that I just described. That trial would have had way less benefit than the ongoing, enduring benefit of making an additional station accessible.
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I think a follow-up, actually, and now I'm showing how old I was. So I was in charge of a small project in the Koch administration where we got local businesses and business associations to back critical improvements in terms of protection of customers. The businesses were very amenable. They were interested because their employees were dependent upon the particular stations we were talking about. Many of them were particularly interested because they had a lot of employees who worked at late nights. It might be interesting to have not a pilot, but to explore with the business community, particularly in stations with incredibly high concentrations of people, where many employees are fearful in overcrowding of being pushed in front of a train, of exploring to them their willingness to underwrite some of this. I think it would be an interesting way to connect. It has an obviously direct impact on their perception in their community and among their employees. Just a suggestion.
Is certainly one I'll bear in mind. I mean, don't get me wrong, just to reiterate, I would love to have platform screen doors. I've worked on systems where they've been added, typically on new build, like the Jubilee Line extension in London. And they are great technology. They have a lot of advantages. But I just want, you pay me to give you your advice. I just advise that doing it here is going to be difficult. And if ultimately it comes down to what are we, seeking the billions that we need for fast forward, I would rather apply that to resignaling the subway to keep people moving, to keep the service moving, than on what you might call more retrospective decisions like fitting platform screen doors. But don't please interpret that as I'm not a fan. I am, and also there are other things I think we can do, particularly in known trouble spots, particularly where there are areas particularly prone to track incursion.
Well, President Byford, I believe Mr. Jones has asked a slightly different question, and that is could there be any interest in the business community to underwrite the entire cost of this?
Okay, I'm sorry I misunderstood that then. I mean, if there is, then I'd love to have that discussion.
Again, I'm putting it out there. Obviously, you have some major businesses. We don't have to mention the leading business that's coming into the city.
Please don't give them any more advertising.
No, I'm not going to give it. I refuse to do it.
Then they might pay for
it. But I think some of them, because they have such enormous numbers of staff using the subway's system to come to work, that it would be both beneficial to them in terms of their employees and their credibility as a good employer, and certainly because if you set it up right, they could get a tax benefit. I hate to say that, but you could work it out that way. Again, I'm trying to offload. I'm not trying to. I understand the priorities of the system, but in this case, we have certain stations that have such high volume and such apparent danger. It doesn't stop somebody from deciding to commit suicide. But if you're on an overcrowded station, the fear, and I have a daughter who rides the system, I'm very fearful of this kind of stuff, and I think a lot of people are. So clearly, I don't have the businesses. I think it might be an interesting discussion to be had with some of them.
Sure. Thanks for the clarification. I think there's a raft of things that we should take away to discuss with local community. I think there's local community and businesses. I think there's lots of opportunities actually to work with the local businesses on these and other enhancements. So I'll add that to the list. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask Mr. Eyrich to present the bus report and paratransit as well.
Good morning. Preliminary metrics in November show a slight decline in bus performance against last year, due in part to severe weather experience over 3 days during the month. We continue to focus on bus performance and the basics. As part of our Fast Forward commitment, we have implemented multiple initiatives to improve reliability. In June, we launched an initiative to target bus bunching on high-priority routes in every borough, focusing on route management and dispatching practices. One key to the success of this effort has been the engagement of frontline staff, making this truly a bottom-up initiative. Since June, bunching on weekdays system-wide is down 5% as compared to the same period last year. These improvements have been led by the Bronx and Queens, where some routes have improved by more than 20%. Of the 18 targeted routes, 13 showed improvement with an average reduction in bunching of almost 10%. Turning to the Staten Island network redesign, I am pleased to report that the Staten Island Express service speeds are up almost 10% in November against the same period last year, and as a result, absolute journey times were 2.3 minutes faster than last year. Our customers can expect to see more service improvements in 2019, including 2 new routes, trip additions, and extensions to existing routes. We have made considerable progress on the other Fast Forward initiatives in 2018, including beginning the Bronx network redesign, implementing a new SBS route, increasing the frequency of off-peak service, implementing transit signal priority on additional routes, and installing digital information screens on buses. In addition, we have been collaborating closely with our partners at DOT and NYPD on many of our Fast Forward initiatives to clear the right-of-way for buses. Finally, I'm happy to report that we also recently hired a Chief EEO Officer, Gwen Halston, who will be giving the EEO report later this morning. On to paratransit. Performance in October remained stable despite a 24% growth in ridership as compared to last year. This month, we rolled out a test version of My AAR, a new feature in the My MTA app. My AAR gives our Access-a-Ride customers more control and more options than ever before, including the ability to schedule, track, and rate your dedicated carrier and broker trips. As a result of feedback from the community, My AAR is fully integrated into both the My MTA app and the new website, which means that paratransit customers can also use the app or the website to see all accessible options for any trip, from subways, buses, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North. I'd like to share a short video that tells the story of John Hatchett, one of more than 100 AAR customers who've helped to design and test the app. Mr. Hatchett found that My MTA gave him more control, not only over Access-a-Ride experience, but also more options with the use of buses. Video. Video.
I've been having mobility challenges, difficulty walking progressively for about 15 years, but for about the last 2.5 years, I have not been walking much at all. So Access-a-Ride has become an ever more important part of my life. I've always liked doing the website to schedule my rides and things as much as possible. Now, within the My MTA, because it's My MTA, there is access. There's a doorway to the Access-a-Ride portion of the app. I can do pretty much anything I need to do related to Access-a-Ride. I can schedule a new ride, a reservation for tomorrow or the day after. I can cancel any existing reservations. I can track the approach of the vehicle to see where it is. That helps me know when to go downstairs. And then when I'm on the vehicle, I can track the progress of the ride toward the destination in real time. And all of that using the same app. I feel like I'm included in the community of users in a very natural way. Not only does it give me the information I need for anything related to paratransit, I have information about the whole transit system. My trip planner within the app lets me select all of the variables that I need, so I can say I want only buses or only subway. I get all of that information wherever I am, as long as I've got my phone. I started to think, well, why not try to make that trip by bus? I'm becoming a real fan of using buses now in a way that I had thought was closed to me once I got in the wheelchair. Now my husband jokes that he doesn't know where the heck I am, and he's very concerned I be safe in my wheelchair out in the world. He also understands that part of the point is exactly that. I'm completely independent. I can change my mind at the last minute if I want to. That it really has changed my life in a very positive way.
So this year we have worked closely with Paratransit Task Force, led by Commissioner Vanderpool, to proactively improve the customer experience, communication, and transparency. Commissioner Vanderpool will be presenting the 2018 Task Force highlights at the MTA Board meeting this month, I believe. I also would like to thank my bus and paratransit team for their hard work and dedication in implementing our Fast Forward initiatives in 2018. And on behalf of my team, I wish to thank Commissioner Vanderpool, her work on paratransit, the entire MTA Board, our MTA colleagues, our partners at New York City DOT and NYPD, our customers, and the community for your invaluable support throughout the year. We look forward to continue to work together, and I wish everyone a happy and safe holiday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eric. Mr. Jones, Ms. Vanderpool, Mr. Merdler.
Darrell, I'd just like to ask you, obviously everyone got caught short with the snowstorm. But I noticed that the articulated buses, once again, were the sort of main sort of victim of this. How do we decide when to pull these buses in the event of inclement weather? I don't know if putting on chains, it seemed like they were really distressed. You saw block after block of these buses just jackknifed.
Right. So I would say you're looking at a person who lived through the calamity of December 26, 2010. And I'm proud to say that, that was a time where we allegedly had 600 buses stuck. And a lot of them were articulated buses, and many of them were standard buses. We've learned a lot. I think we've come a long way in terms of our emergency planning, coordinating, and returning back to service. This was a difficult storm, particularly because it was not forecasted to be the storm that it turned out to be. And most of our actions, I would say all of our action as it relates to snow planning, is based on the forecast. And we always do a lot of introspection to see if there was ways to improve, were there opportunities to do something different. When I looked at every one of those forecasts, they did not even imply that we would have any kind of conditions that we had. So this was one that we had to manage while we were out there to try to get buses back in. And what was particularly difficult about this storm is we had taken people to work and taken people to school that morning, and then it came upon us and we had to get them home. So it was a very, very difficult situation, not just for buses, for everyone involved. I was stuck out there myself for roughly 3 hours trying to get home that day.
I'll just add a little bit more.
I'm sorry, did Ms. Vanderpool want to leave her turn, and then Mr. Merdler?
Oh, okay. I'll be quick. I'll just add a little bit more to that, David. The city has undertaking an after-action report where we've been talking to the MTA and the Port Authority and all our partners, and we will, I think, be putting out a report at the, kind of the very unique circumstances of this particular storm, but all the things we're going to try and do in the future to make sure we can do a better job. And I think all the agencies are going to work on that together.
Ms. Vanderpool.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is very encouraging to see how the bus action plan and the Staten Island redesign are yielding some very significant changes, particularly in bus bunching, as you've pointed out, and bus service speeds. Those have been issues that advocates have been talking about for a good deal of time, that you all have focused your efforts on with regards, again, to the bus action plan. And it's wonderful to see these percentages. And I only expect, as I'm sure you all do, to see those percentages increase as these changes are continuing to be made and realized. So thanks for all of those efforts. It's wonderful to see some good news with our bus service, because we've not had a lot of it lately, as you all know.
Thank you, and thanks to the entire bus team and all the support that we get. Thank you.
And then I just have a question. At our last meeting in November, I had inquired about the Clear Bus Lane Initiative and more specifics, which of course you referenced in your remarks. And Chief Delatorre, my question actually was directed to the chief, who noted that Chief Chan handles buses. Do we have any more information to share with the committee about this Clear Bus Lane Initiative now that it's been in place about a month?
So I would love to give you a more comprehensive response because it's ongoing. I think we just had some actions last week. They've all been very positive. It's been a very, what I would call a new and unique relationship with the NYPD. They've given us a lot of attention. We work with many of Chief Chan's assistant chiefs and lieutenants. So it's, it would probably be more appropriate that maybe in the coming months to give you a real comprehensive report on some of the work that's been done.
Yes, I appreciate that. And I think what I was interested in knowing is how successful it's been, how the corridors are being chosen, and how much longer do we anticipate this initiative to last? Because I don't think I'm in the minority amongst any staff or board members to think that this shouldn't just be an initiative, this should just be ongoing SOP. So I would welcome that report with more detail, hopefully sooner than later. So you mentioned, Darryl, perhaps in a few months, if that could be maybe 1 or 2 months.
You know what, I'll make it a priority for next month to give you a briefing on it.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Merdler.
2 questions, if I may, but first, I think you need to add to the mix of NYPD and buses, DOT, which has been really focusing heavily on trying to clear those lanes. And I think you need to include them in any planning that you're doing, if I may.
Absolutely.
2 questions, if I may, are the following. First, have you come to a point yet where you have an idea as to whether e-hail adds significantly to cost, doesn't, what the numbers might be? Because there seems to be universal acclaim of that program.
Yes, the program is very, very popular. You know, it gives our customers, you know, much more reliability, more flexibility, but it does come at a cost. The cost is can be rather significant, even though the unit cost is much less, probably roughly half that of a primary carrier. But the demand of it and the volume of trips, due to, you know, as a result of its popularity, is rather expensive.
Darryl, could you at some point, when you are comfortable doing so, give us a report giving some estimates as to the costs if it's fully expanded and the like? Because I've heard nothing but praise of it, and I think that's true of every member of the board. The second question is one that grows out of the Special Finance Committee meeting last week. Fare evasion, which was more active in the bus area than it was in the subway area. The suggestion was made that the New York Police Department, which does such a terrific job in the transit system, expand, in the subway system, expand its oversight to the bus system. Unfortunately, the Eagle Squad, which does a job, and I was remiss in failing to say that, is not comprised of police officers. And my question is, has any communication or discussion been had, and if not, when can we have it, to try and expand to the police department a more active role in connection with buses? Bear in mind, you're talking about over $100 million a year of fare evasion. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, those numbers are staggering, and we're looking at a number of initiatives. Number one, we have a program headed up right now by Bobby Deal. It's called our RBS program. Of course, like you said, they're not police officers in that role. But I certainly, and I think most of the team would be very supportive of some type of dedicated police force that would be dedicated to buses and its issues, whether it be lane clearing, whether it be safety and the environment of the bus and fare evasion. So we're having those discussions internally from a conceptual perspective, and we can report back as those things evolve. But
and Mr. Byford, could you, among the many priorities that you're juggling, could you give some attention to this? Because 119 million, which is my recollection of the number.
It's 119.
Of estimated 118?
119.
119 is a significant number. If you could give some attention to that, and then also to the point of trying to do something at the subway turnstiles, which is another 100 million. There is 2/3 of the fare increase between the two of them.
Okay, so the answer is yes. It's already receiving my personal attention. So personal, in fact, that along with a colleague, I was at Borough Hall this morning, deliberately standing by the exit gate to not physically stop people, but to be a visible deterrent against people trying to sneak in. And it was extremely effective, because people don't, when they see the orange vest and they see you standing there, a couple of you, and we had NYPD with us, that does act as a visible deterrent. So a number of people turned back and went somewhere else or went to buy a ticket. On the buses, we are actively talking to the chief, not just about the fare evasion thing, to your point, although that is absolutely front and center of my mind, but also to the wider point that Darrell mentioned about, and Commissioner Vanterpool mentioned about, not just a blitz on bus lanes, but keeping them that way. So rest assured, this is a relentless, ongoing focus and priority.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I promised the chairman I would.
Thank you.
Just two things. Obviously, I've made the point that I want equitable enforcement, and I think we understand each other on that. I'm wondering, we haven't had a report on the new touchless system, which starts 2019, and the question of whether this might be a partial solution to some of the things we're talking about here, whether being able to get through a gate, or certainly have someone be able to check your device to see if you're appropriately on buses. We haven't heard much other than the fact we approved this new process, but I'd be very interested in hearing how the new process is rolling out, and also its potential for cutting down on fare evasion throughout the system.
No, we will gladly arrange that. But in 10 seconds, the big advantage is that system gives you proof of payment across the whole network, both buses and subways. In that, at the moment, once you're in, you're in. But with the new system, once we migrate everyone onto it, inspectors will be able to tell straight away with the swipe of a card or touch of a card through a device, a handheld device, did you pay the fare? Did you pay the right fare across the whole system? But we'll get you a briefing.
Mr. Weisbrod.
Just a brief question. Since as of last month, the issue of fare evasion and the size of it is now on the table and an issue we are focusing on, would it be possible to add, Tim, to the monthly data reports changes up, down, sideways? Is it on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis? Just so we have a sense of whether we are making progress, not making progress, losing ground, or whatever.
It would be possible on a quarterly basis, not a monthly basis.
I would ask that we include that on a quarterly basis, just so we can track that. Thanks.
Mr. Glucksman.
Am I incorrect in the thinking that the Eagle team doesn't have the ability to issue summonses or something? What do they do if someone is not on with a...
No, we do have the ability to issue a summons. It's a tab
okay.
summons, it's a civil summons. We do have that ability, but we
Okay.
are not peace officers or police officers, and that's where the difference is. You know, we work with a lot of behavior modification that we do out there. Our main mission is to get people to pay the fare. That's the bottom line, not summonses, and I think we want people to pay the fare. And by having people out there, especially with high visibility, like Select Bus Service, we do achieve that.
All right, thank you.
The accessibility update will be presented by Mr. Elagudin.
Thank you, Chairman. So following up on Darrell's comments on the new features in the My MTA app, we've also released some new elevator and escalator status functionality in the MyMTA app that customers have asked us for, including the ability to see which elevators are working as opposed to not just working, and many other user interface upgrades, which were launched in November, and we have even more happening over the next few weeks to allow our customers to have as close to real-time possible information as possible to plan their journeys based on current elevator status. We also continue to deploy the alternate route signs on our elevators, and we'll continue on that initiative until we have every accessible station fully signed up. Very happy to report that in November, our unit held an engagement with the Transit Bureau of the NYPD. We hosted a dialogue and disability training for more than 50 neighborhood coordination officers, NCOs, where they heard from half a dozen bus and subway users with a range of disabilities. We had a multi-hour dialogue full of real-world lessons about how Transit Bureau officers can better interact and assist passengers with disabilities and better understand the challenges of the NYPD in working with the disability community. It was very open and candid, where customers with disabilities discussed their challenges and fears, and we began the dialogue of breaking down those barriers. This is just the beginning of our community engagement work on many different levels, and we plan to do similar engagements with disabled customers for group station managers of our subways, as well as other key New York City Transit personnel. The work on the study of inaccessible stations continue. We are on track to meet our goal of 150 stations studied by the end of the year, and the remaining stations by the end of next year. But we also plan to start conversations on the next 50 stations and how to prioritize which ones to be selected early in 2019. Additionally, I'm very excited to report that the bathrooms on the 20th floor here at 2 Broadway are now fully accessible, something that has been a work in progress, and myself as well as customers with disabilities will no longer have to go to another floor. So that was implemented over the last few weeks, and I think it shows it's a small part, but important to show the incremental improvements in accessibility here in our house as well as in the transit system. To all the advocates here today speaking on eHail, I just want to say that your voices have been heard. There are many, many discussions about what to do with eHail and the future of it happening internally. By no means do I want you to feel like this is not something we're taking very seriously. We are at all levels of the agency, and thank you for your continued advocacy and support. Lastly, stay tuned for many accessibility developments and new projects in 2019. A lot is in the work, and I'm excited to continue this work and report further developments and improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything from Mr. Elagudin? Ms. Vanterpool.
First, thank you for all your efforts. Since you've been part of this team, we've seen some very direct, tangible improvements, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
With regards to the neighborhood coordination officers, is that a new initiative?
That is a new initiative of the NYPD, specifically the NYPD as a whole, and as for the Transit Bureau, where officers are working on an array of kind of new tasks that are more neighborhood oriented. They were specifically selected for that role, and their presence.
I can help you with that.
Oh, go ahead. Yes, please, Chief. Thank you.
So yes, it is fairly new. We rolled out 2 districts early this year. We rolled out 4 more districts, I believe, in April, and we're on schedule to roll out 3 more districts in January. We hope to have all 12 districts rolled out by the spring. Currently, the neighborhood policing program exists in districts 3, 4, 12, 20, 30, and 32. So in those districts, what we've done is, and if you go onto the subway platforms, you'll often see a picture of 2 police officers along with the group station manager. Those are the teams that we've put together to share responsibility for everything going on at those stations and on those lines. The neighborhood coordination offices have very restricted areas. They have what we call sectors. So we've broken up the actual transit district, which is what we would call a precinct in the transit system. We've broken them up into sectors. Generally, there's 3 sectors. And we've assigned neighborhood coordination officers specifically to those sectors. And then in addition to that, to support them, we've assigned steady sector officers, all of whom, for the most part, will never leave those sectors. They just work those sectors, and they have ownership, such as a landlord would, of the property there, the stations as well as the lines going through. So they work with the GSMs on specific issues that come about within those sectors. Any problems on a platform, any problems going beyond the normal crime fighting, although they still are fighting crime. And you'll hear a little bit about that when I give my report. Okay?
Thank you for the additional detail. I think it's wonderful that one of the earlier conversations of this new initiative is with passengers with disabilities. So thank you for the initiative, but also prioritizing this customer base.
Yeah, I actually attended the training with Alex, and I thought it was great. I thought it really helped reach our offices where they needed to be reached, to make them a little more sensitive to the issues that exist and even more aware of issues that exist. And the speakers who showed up there from the disabled community, I think, were outstanding. And they really got through to the cops. I could see it in the cops' faces and in the questions they asked. So great work, Alex.
And thank you, Chief, for your support. I mean, I think what makes these engagements a little different is we have lots of training materials, presentations, different kinds of things. But here you have, we were in a room with 50 officers and 6 people with disabilities sharing real life stories, having a dialogue right across the table, raising that awareness about, when you encounter me in the system as a person with disability, here are some of the things I go through. Here's a way to be sensitive towards it. And again, we think it's going to be very important for our GSMs, our elevator maintainers, and many other groups within the system where that added level of sensitivity and connection to the community, because their work directly impacts it, will be very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready for Ms. Meyer's Strategy and Customer Experience Report?
Hi, team. So our focus on improving customer engagement continues to show results. This month, correspondence teams responded to more than 21,000 communications from our customers via social, email, and letter. Our wait time at the call center decreased a whopping 61% year over year. And we also launched our new Courtesy Pass program, rebranding our old block tick program. They look kind of similar, but we have expanded it to now work with those with disabilities and strollers when elevators are not in service. This program allows customers to transfer to another subway line if they encounter an unexpected disruption in service. We're also moving full steam ahead on the initiatives outlined in the Q4 customer commitment, including installing countdown clocks on the 2nd Avenue subway, installing digital screens at 50 stations, including recently done at Court Square, at Nassau Ave on the G, and on buses throughout the 5 boroughs. We'll provide a full update on the Q4 commitment in January. Until then, happy holidays to all of you.
Thank you. There are no questions from Ms. Meyer. I'll ask Mr. Deal to present the safety report.
Okay, thank you. The safety report starts on page 97, and here's some highlights of the safety report. Subway fires were slightly higher when comparing it with the rolling 12-month period, although fires on a year-to-date period has actually seen a decrease. Bus collisions and collision injuries continue to decrease when comparing those same periods, and bus customer accidents showed a slight increase. Subway customer accidents showed an increase when comparing them within the 12-month rolling period. But it should be worth noting that we've continued to decrease on a monthly basis. For instance, we actually saw a 6% decrease in accidents during the month of October. Employee lost time accidents remain relatively flat when comparing them to the same period last year. And New York City Transit continues to make steady progress against all our leading indicator goals. Thank you, and have a happy holiday to everybody.
Any questions from Mr. Deal? Hearing none, thank you for your report. Now, someone you've heard before.
Yes.
Chief Delatorre.
Good morning, everyone. Total major felonies year-to-date are up 1.6%, a difference of 35 incidents compared to last year. During the month of November, there were 15 additional major felonies versus last year, with 257 incidents versus 242 in 2017. Year-to-date, 41%. Excuse me. Year-to-date, 41% of our total major felonies occurred in Manhattan, 31% in Brooklyn, 15% in the Bronx, and 13% in Queens. As we have seen a slight increase in robberies and grand larcenies for the year, with an additional 37 such incidents combined through November, we've also made several significant arrests of individuals we believe were responsible for several, if not many, of the recent thefts from riders. Last Thursday, a team of Transit District 3 officers, which included our neighborhood coordination officers, were conducting an operation related to a grand larceny pattern in Manhattan when they observed the man depicted in a recent wanted poster, accompanied by 2 other men. As the officers moved in, the men committed a robbery in their presence and were quickly apprehended. Dupree Johnson, Thomas Capone, and Lamika Moore have been charged with robbery, and detectives with the Transit Manhattan Robbery Squad continue their work on this case and the associated crimes in this pattern. All 3 defendants are awaiting their next court appearance. On the same day last week, officers from District 4 arrested 39-year-old John Galazza for grand larceny after they recognized him from video of a crime a day prior. Galazza grabbed a rider's cell phone at the 14th Street Union Square station, and we suspect there were several other similar larcenies that Galazza may have been involved in. As investigators looked into other crimes, Galazza is in custody and awaiting his next court date. He has 36 prior arrests, including several for burglary, robbery, felony assault, and fare evasion. Galazza is on parole for a prior burglary conviction, and we are working to have his parole revoked as a result of this grand larceny case. I remind riders to be diligent in securing their belongings during this busy holiday season to reduce the opportunity for theft. At the same time, our teams will be working hard to curb persistent and pattern offenders like this who can quickly cause spikes in crime. With that, I thank you, wish each of you a safe and enjoyable holiday season, and I welcome any questions or suggestions you may have.
First, a question. Where is the 34th district?
The 34th district is in Brooklyn, and it covers Sunset Park, Bay Ridge, Borough Park, Bensonhurst, Coney Island, Sheepshead Bay, etc.
It is, of course, the one with the greatest increase.
It certainly does. We've had 12 bias incidents. The majority of them are graffiti, and we've had 4 arrests on those. We're also engaging in other operations, utilizing technology to help us apprehend people that may, in the future, commit offenses in that district as well.
I contrast it with District 30, which we had focused on previously and where you have paid particular attention, and where you see anti-Semitic, anti-people of color acts, anti-Hispanic acts, anti-Muslim acts decrease.
Yes.
And I congratulate you and your colleagues for the excellent job. The question I have for you, and it may not be capable of a ready answer, is other than apprehension, is there anything at all in this world that we can do to stop these kind of folk doing this kind of stuff? Namely, bigotry demonstrated in an awful fashion.
Yeah, well, coming from my patrol background, I would certainly say that education is a key factor here as well. Getting out to the schools and speaking to the teenagers in our high schools, who we often find are the ones behind a lot of the graffiti and or SWAT stickers that are drawn, throughout the stations and in the bathrooms. So I think to that end, a little more education certainly would be helpful.
And does that also attach to those incidents like one I heard on the radio this morning of where there's physical violence?
It certainly may when we're talking about teenagers. When we're talking about adults with other issues, that's a different story. In some cases, we do go out when we see multiple events in or around a station, we will go out and speak to the principal at the school and see if we can engage the school in some way that would help us with the problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's nothing else for Chief Delatorre. Thank you, Chief, and I'll ask Ms. Patel to give us the City Transit and Staten Island Railway Finance Report.
I guess I'll say good afternoon. Preliminary October year-to-date results for New York City Transit are as follows. Average weekday ridership for the 12 months ending October 2018 was 7.3 million. It was 3.2% lower than the 12 months ending October 2017. Year-to-date fare box revenue was 1.8 million below forecast, and non-reimbursable expenses year-to-date were below forecast by 32.7 million. On the MTA bus side, year-to-date fare box revenue was 1.8 million above forecast, and non-reimbursable expenses year-to-date were below forecast by 28.2 million. Total bus ridership for October 2018 was 3.3% above forecast. That concludes my report.
Is there any question on that? Thank you, Ms. Patel. Are we ready for the capital program? Mr. O'Grady.
Good afternoon. October highlights. Since the last Transit Committee, we awarded 16 projects totaling $202.5 million. This included platform component replacement, such as edges, rubbing boards, tactile warning strips, and column repairs for 4 stations on the L line, in-house station ventilator reconstruction at 6 stations in the Bronx and Brooklyn, new paratransit technology investments, which include onboard equipment with real-time scheduling and computer-aided dispatch software that will be integrated into a new automatic vehicle location monitoring system in order to optimize trips for the fastest and most efficient routes, totaling $26.7 million, and the installation of low-resistance contact rail on the Queens Boulevard line. This is intended to increase throughput on the Queens Boulevard line upon completion of communications-based train control on that line. Also in September, we completed 5 projects totaling $44.8 million. This included 3 stair replacement small business mentoring program projects and track and switch replacement projects on the Concourse and Brighton line. This concludes the capital program report.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. O'Grady? Yes, Mr. Greenberg.
Yeah, just very briefly, maybe more of a comment. You know, the fan plant, it's an interesting thing. We seem to be moving ahead there. There was a fan, this was a couple of years ago, there was a fan plant, there was a contract for a fan plant proposed for the Lexington Avenue line in a location that got a very high rating that it needed one. That was put off for a while. I'm just wondering if maybe the board can have an update on that, not necessarily now, but in the future, because if that location truly is a place that needs a fan plant, it'd be good to know what the substitute is or whether that project's going to proceed.
Can you do that now?
I think what I should say is that I believe it's now prioritized in the next program, but we'll get an exact update and come back to you at the next, update the board at the next meeting.
Please come back to the committee and send Judge-to-be Greenberg his reply in the usual way. Anyone else? We're ready for procurements. Mr. Plachaki.
Good afternoon. The procurement package representing New York City Transit procurements includes one item for approximately $1.1 million. The item submitted this month is a modification to a construction contract for foundation work required to incorporate a new ADA elevator at the southbound 8th Avenue station located on the Sea Beach line in Brooklyn. The base contract provides for the renewal of 6 stations along this line. During the design phase of the project, it was determined that ADA-compliant access would block the roadway of an adjoining property, and thus ADA southbound access was not part of the original contract. However, an agreement in principle with the owner of the adjacent property has been reached, allowing the reincorporation of the ADA-compliant access by installing an elevator for the southbound platform. The new elevator installation work will require several contract modifications in addition to this modification, some of which will be presented to the board at a later date. This modification provides for the platform foundation work, additional support beams, and a widening of a section of the southbound platform slab to accommodate the elevator and stairs. Negotiations resulted in an agreed-upon lump sum price of $1,054,000, which was found to be fair and reasonable. Work began on October 12th in order not to impact the project schedule. I ask for your approval of this item.
Mr. Weisbrod.
So, as you know, I always have a hard time with these ratifications, which are, I still don't know quite what since the work has been done and the approvals essentially moot. But this is part of, is this the last, this work is supposed to get done, or is done now. Is this the last ratification we're going to have under this contract, or is there more work still to be done?
A couple of answers to that. One, the work is not completed here. It was just recently turned on, so as not to impact the schedule. So the work is not completed. We've certainly heard that message from the board, and we are working across the agencies in order to develop a way to report back to the board on any upcoming items, preferably before they're retroactive, but in any case, in a much shorter time frame. There are other items, as I mentioned in the document, that will be coming back to the board, some of which may be retroactive, again, in order to hold the schedule. And they're all interrelated with regard to being able to incorporate this southbound elevator.
So I'm not quite clear why this all can't be done at one time instead of in this rolling basis where we end up sort of ratifying something that's already finished?
Again,
since you know already that there are more things that are likely to be done here?
We are in the process of scoping those additional items out and starting to get ready to either A, negotiate with the contractor, or either A, turn them on. The issue that we have is we've broken up this large portion of work in order so to mitigate the impact on the actual schedule. So when you have a large item that have multiple components, what you tend to do is try and get the long lead time items out of the way, chunk it, if you will, and turn them on so that you're not on the critical path, or you mitigate any of the work on the critical path. That's why you see this come sort of as parts, and that's why we don't wait until we've got it all done and then bring it back, because then you'd be literally riding on the critical path of the contract and ultimately delaying the closure of or the opening of the station.
Now, as you know, we've had this conversation to provide a degree of flexibility. I mean, these are 6 stations, right? I mean, that are interconnected. Is that?
Yes, yes, they are. But there's only the one instant issue is on 8th Avenue.
And the other 6 stations or other 5 stations are all completed, or we're going to get more work on those as well?
The work on those stations is also underway.
I mean, I guess on the one hand, I realize that there are always going to be situations where we face undiscovered or previously discovered conditions that require additional work. But on the other hand, it just seems to me that in a project of this size, where we have 6 different stations, a lot of moving parts, either we should have enough flexibility in the contract initially so that not everything has to be done at the last minute and it doesn't have to come back to the board for what is essentially a pro forma vote. And to that, it just seems to me that we should be able to do a procurement of this complexity. It's $200 million procurement overall that anticipates to some degree these kinds of circumstances and gives management the flexibility and the control to act responsibly without coming back here for every little thing.
If I might, and I'm glad you said that. That's exactly what we're working on. But rather than come back in sort of a splintered way, we heard you loud and clear, and we are coordinating this particular activity with all of the MTA agencies so that when we come back to you, we will have a way of doing that across the board for the operating agencies when they deal with construction contracts.
So one other question about this is, which is that the procurement says that the contract's substantial completion date is December 28th. And that's literally 18 days away. So at this point, I don't understand why we necessarily would be coming back here for additional work. Don't we know if it's only 18 days away from substantial completion, how much work remains?
So there's going to be an extension of time associated with this work. So this is just a component of the work at 8th Avenue Station. We have, yes.
So why are we saying the substantial completion in this procurement if we know already that there's going to be extension? Why are we saying the substantial completion date is December 28th if it's not actually December 28th?
Because that's the contractual substantial completion date, and we haven't negotiated a formal extension of time or any impactable delays that may be associated with that. This is actively an ongoing project where the original or the prior substantial completion date was the one that's mentioned in the contract. This is quite typical of contracts. You don't get it updated periodically. You wait until you understand the full impact, and then you negotiate it, and you make sure that you are identifying all the items on the critical path so you're not sort of being chipped away at as the date moves to the right, and you end up negotiating the ultimate impact on cost and mitigating that overall expense.
I guess one of the things that concerns me about this, this contract for the 6 stations was competitively bid initially.
Correct. Yes.
So once it's competitively bid, then any modifications are not competitively bid because we have a contractor there and we simply have to negotiate a price, and in a sense we don't have quite the same leverage as we do when we competitively bid. The project in the first instance. So that's one of the reasons why to have that flexibility up front would be so advantageous, because when we modify a contract late in the game, we really don't have the same leverage over the contractor that we do when there's competition.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, and that's just a function of any construction contract where you have changes. In this particular case, I'd like to think that adding an additional ADA elevator to this station was well worthwhile once we got through the issue with the adjoining property owner's issue with regard to the encroaching roadway. And that's why it's coming late, but while they're mobilized there, while they've got other work going on, we believe that it was an important decision to make in order to get the ADA elevator in.
And if I could just add to that, once we realized the opportunity to add the elevator, we didn't want to absorb the cost of having to redo work at the 8th Avenue Control House that we could have finished. But this, then adding the elevator on a follow-up contract would have had to undo. So there's a significant effort to make sure that the work that we have in the core contract wouldn't have to be redone. And so it made sense to add the elevator at this time.
You know, I'm not questioning the desirability of adding the elevator. I am questioning the desirability of doing it after we've let a contract. This is, I'm sorry, my colleague, Mr. Reckler, is not here, but I think he's going to be making a procurement or a contracting report at, I believe, on Wednesday. Is that correct? At the board meeting. And one of the issues that I know they're really focused on is this this conduct of adding desirable items to a contract after it's been let, and the incrementalism of contracts that really do cause our costs to rise. And while I fully appreciate the desirability of providing accessibility, but it just seems to me that this is exactly the kind of thing that Mr. Reckler and his committee are seeking to address. And to see it come back to us where essentially all we're asked to do is raise our hand because the work has been done, I just don't think is the right way to be doing business.
I just respectfully repeat that the work is not done. It was just recently awarded, so the work is not done. This, unlike some of the issues that you've raised in the past, which we have taken to note, we are not bringing back done deals. In other words, where all the work is completed.
Allow me to interpose a question. When was the RFP for this, the underlying work, issued? Yeah.
The base contract was awarded in December 30, 2014.
Okay.
Okay, so quite a number of years ago.
That answers my question.
I might just make one further comment, though, if I may, Commissioner Weisbrod. And I think you raised some very valid concerns. But again, to try to put your mind at rest, there's certain things that are just chugging through the pipeline that we just need to finish off. We are totally on side with Commissioner Reckler's work. In fact, we've taken the lead on it on behalf of other agencies through Steve's good work and his expertise. I mean, like you, I don't like retrospective orders. I don't like situations where effectively a contractor arguably has you over a barrel for changes once that contract has been let. It's one of the upsides of design build, because if it's design build, you can't come back and argue that you need to get some extra money for changes because the design's changed. Sorry, it was your design, so you carry that risk. So we are very much alive to this issue. We want to get the scope right from the start, whether that be a traditional procurement or whether it be design build, such that there is no question of scope creep and no potential for design change other than if something that literally couldn't have been foreseen comes up. But for that, you should have contingency.
And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I totally agree with that. I just, in response to Steve, just note that we're being asked to ratify an action that's already been taken, which is the procurement. And maybe the work has not been completed, it's supposed to be completed 18 days from now, although I gather it may not be completed 18 days from now. So we are being asked to just raise our hands to approve something. I would much prefer, and we've had this conversation many times, I would much prefer to give management the flexibility to anticipate unforeseen circumstances so we can get the best bids we possibly can get, so these don't return to the board, and so contractors don't have us over the barrel. But at the same time, there are two different sets of situations. One, unforeseen circumstances or things we didn't anticipate. That's one thing, and we should give flexibility for that. And on the other hand, decisions by, however meritorious, decisions by operations on the ground saying, well, gee, it would be nice to add this, it would be nice to add that, it would be nice to add something else. And that is, just to me, is exactly the kind of thing that we shouldn't be doing.
I agree. The former requires the right contract and the right contingency budget. The latter constitutes scope creep, and we shouldn't be entertaining it. And so I'm fully on side with what Commissioner Reckler is coming up with, and you can hold us to adhering to that.
Mr. Merdler.
Just to complete the discussion, over a period of many months,
it's not complete.
The Procurement Committee, on which we both serve together with others, Steve has been focusing on the idea of a contingency, which is something that has been recommended by staff. However, you have to balance that off. You have to balance it off and provide safeguards. For example, if you have a contingency, the contractor is going to see to himself, aha, in bidding, there's an additional pot of money that I can glom onto later on down the road. There are instances where having a contingency creates not leverage for you, but leverage against you. Those are the kinds of things they've been trying to figure out an offset. It takes time because it does lead to a potential of abuse. And the fact that it has to come back to the board, so we spend 3 more minutes on it. But as against the possibility of abuse, I'd rather spend those 3 or 4 minutes rather than doing that.
I agree with you, Mr. Merdler. Let's move on.
I just want to register my disagreement with what Mr. Merdler just said.
Good. Because this horse is dead. Were you going to ask for approval of these items?
Yes, can I have an approval of this item, please?
Just wanted to be helpful. Is there a motion to approve? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? An abstention. There is one abstention, Mr. Weisbrod, and that will be noted. These procurements and then move to the full board. Ms. Patel, there is an action item you wish to present?
Yes. We are seeking the committee's approval of the 2018 November forecast, the 2019 final proposed budget, and the four-year financial plan for the years 2019 through 2022 for New York City Transit, Staten Island Railway, and MTA Bus Company. Budget and financial plan information was included in the materials that were presented to the MTA Board last month, as well as discussed at the Special Finance Committee meeting last week, and will be presented again to both the Finance Committee and the full Board for final approval this month. The 2019 final proposed budget and the financial plan for New York City Transit, Staten Island Railway, and MTA Bus maintain funding to support planned service levels in a safe, reliable, and efficient manner. The budget includes funding for new programmatic initiatives as well as budget reduction initiatives at the agencies. The committee agenda book includes staff summaries for New York City Transit, Staten Island Railway, and MTA Bus that provide details for programmatic and budget reduction initiatives, as well as key financial data for each agency. I ask for your approval.
Is there any discussion on this action item? Mr. Albert, then Mr. Greenberg.
I have a couple of questions. The farebox revenue projections that are contained in this resolution, do they account for any improvement in dealing with fare evasion, or do they assume it's going to get worse?
They assume a baseline for the fare evasion. They don't include an increase or enforcement initiatives.
And do they assume the aforementioned budget reduction initiatives that President Byford has indicated, including the lack of cleaning of cars on both lines on both ends and those sort of initiatives?
Yes, they do.
They do. Thank you.
Mr. Greenberg.
Yes, I received a rumor, I can't find anything that would say this, but that somehow there's some reduction in ADA services or some kind of budget adjustment or maybe some initiative to do. I didn't see anything. I just figured I'd ask to make sure that.
The budget actually includes, over the plan
Right.
period, $321 million increase for.
But there's no action, maybe something that would be interpreted to mean that I could see that nobody here does.
not that I
Okay,
know.
thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Weisbrod.
I'm going to support this budget at this stage, although I have very, very, very serious reservations about it and about the overall budget that we'll be discussing in the Finance Committee. On the very specific elements of the budget, I've expressed at our finance meeting last week how perplexed I am that we, after hearing all about the effectiveness of the Eagle teams, why we are reducing personnel instead of expanding personnel. And I understand that deployment may be more effective by doing it on a borough-wide basis, but nevertheless, it seems to me that this is the kind of service that more than pays for itself, and given our issues with fare evasion, I just don't, frankly, just don't understand it. However, I recognize that is a management issue. I am, however, we've heard a lot of testimony or reports today from Mr. Byford and his staff, and I really want to commend them for the work that they've done over the past year and the staff that Mr. Byford has put together and the green shoots that seem to be growing. But I recognize also, and some of us, I know you, Mr. Chairman, and and Mr. Jones at least remember how long it took for the public to appreciate that crime was going down in the city after crime started dropping precipitously, and how long it took for the public to appreciate that subway improvement, subway efficiency and operations really improved in the 80s, well after it started to improve. And so there is a real need for resources here to assure that both operationally and capital investments are made in the system. This budget is, and you'll hear more about this at the Finance Committee, is not a balanced budget by any stretch of the imagination. We have absolutely no certainty at all, in fact, quite the opposite, that there will be a fair increase that will enable even this budget to go forward. We face $123 million overall in the system of unidentified cuts. All of that amounts to about $500 million. So it's really problematic whether we even have a budget that's meaningful here. But I do really, just in support of the work that's been undertaken in the past year and the hopes that that work can be sustained through increased revenue from a whole host of sources next year. I will at least support it at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Weisbrod. I'm going to ask Judy McLean to address service changes. I want to point out that she is serving as acting chief of operations planning since Peter Caffiero is on assignment as acting director of MTA planning. Neither of these titles has been permanently appointed, and more about that at another meeting. Ms. McLean.
Good afternoon. There are two staff summaries in your package on service changes. The first one I'm going to talk about is for bus schedule changes effective April 2019. As part of our normal business, we regularly review and revise schedules to ensure that we are meeting our current ridership demand and that running times accurately reflect. Oh, sorry.
I want to thank our ad hoc counsel, Mr. Jones, for pointing out that very important point. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Budget carries. Sorry, Ms. McLean, but you will undoubtedly agree that that was an important thing to do.
Yes. Okay. As part of our normal business, we regularly review and revise schedules to ensure that we're meeting our current ridership demand and that running times accurately reflect observed traffic conditions. Traffic speeds, including those for buses, have generally slowed in recent years, and bus schedules must reflect these changing conditions. Adding running time to a route while maintaining the same frequencies requires that additional buses be added to the route, and we have a limited number of buses. Therefore, to add service where it is needed, we need to reallocate service from routes where we are operating below our loading guidelines. 48 schedules are going to be readjusted. Service frequencies will be increased on 22 schedules to address ridership increases, reduced on 13 schedules, and running times will be increased on 13 schedules to improve reliability. We are also converting the BX36 route to articulated buses, resulting in a 28% increase in seat capacity. These changes will generate a net cost savings of $2.5 million, which is coming from the articulated bus conversion of the BX36 route. The second staff summary is on our temporary bus routes for the L project. To provide service to L train riders during the L project, 6 new temporary bus routes will be implemented. These routes have been presented to the public at numerous meetings and have been adjusted in response to community input. We expect these new routes to carry approximately 17% of the riders currently riding the L between Brooklyn and Manhattan. 5 of the routes will be select bus service routes. The M14 SBS will operate across 14th Street and will connect to the temporary L Project ferry at 20th Street and Avenue C. The L1, 2, 3, and 4 routes will operate across the Williamsburg Bridge and will also be SBS routes with off-board fare collection. A 6th route, the L5 Limited, will operate between Canarsie and Crown Heights, connecting riders to the 3 and 4 lines at the Utica Avenue station. New York City Transit has worked in very, very close cooperation and in partnership with New York City DOT to develop a wide range of street treatments. These include restricted access to Grand Street in Brooklyn, priority bus access onto and off of the Williamsburg Bridge, HOV 3+ restrictions on the Williamsburg Bridge, bus lanes on Delancey, Kenmare, and Allen Streets, and a busway on 14th Street. These street treatments will help ensure that these temporary bus routes will operate without major traffic delays. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions? Andrew?
Judy, this is obviously no reflection on you. I've known you for years, but the boilerplate language that you started this discussion off with, we have to routinely do this to meet the demand. There has been no indication that on the routes that are getting service cuts that any attempt was made to identify if there's a problem in throughput on those routes, what we might be able to do to improve the running time and thus desirability of riders. And to give you an example, the M72, which I get numerous complaints about, which is being cut again, people have told me that to go from West 72nd Street to East 72nd Street, they find it faster, believe it or not, to take an 2 or 3 express to Times Square and an uptown queue back up to 72nd Street and 2nd Avenue. They make better time than they do on the M72. So I'm just wondering, I understand that you've been given this and this is what we're dealing with now, but all of these routes, have any of them undergone a real thorough examination to see what the problem is and why ridership is abandoning them?
So in some cases, we feel that the reduction in ridership has been an effect of the 2nd Avenue subway. And so some of these routes, we looked at them and the ridership was down. If you notice in the package, for example, on the M72, the cut that we're making, the percentages in terms of where we are of our guideline, we cut to about 70%. So we took a very measured approach. We will go out, we will check these routes and make sure that we're still within our loading guidelines.
Oh, I'm sorry. And one other important question. Are these counts done with swipes in or a dipping of a MetroCard in the fare box, or are they done visually?
It's a combination. So we do look at AFC data, MetroCard data. We have a fare evasion factor based on our experience and the information we have on fare evasion. We run those numbers, but then in addition, we do go out and we do actual checks. So it's a combination of both of those.
When you do the actual checks, are they done in several different seasons at several different times of day, or just once and that's it?
It's more than one count, but it's not over many different seasons, because obviously we have to write the schedules at a particular point in time.
It's for a
and
pick.
then, right.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Yes.
As you know, I'm a great proponent of community boards. To what extent do you get important information from the community boards before you make a final determination and give them the data so that they can make a judgment?
We regularly meet with community boards, and before this meeting, a letter went out informing the community boards.
How much before?
I know it was probably, and I don't know if Rob's here.
Now that's the whole problem. And I've been saying this now for the entire time I've been on the board. You send out the letter to the community board on the eve of action when you know you cannot assemble 30 people to act on it within that time. Either you have respect for the community or you don't. If you have any respect for the input of the people who live in the area, you have an absolute obligation to give them timely opportunity to comment. I know that both Andy Byford and his staff have often said that their primary goal is to serve the customers. Those are the representatives of the customers. They are the grassroots. You are not unique. I have had this quarrel with Peter for 7 years. Either you respect the community or you don't. And if you respect the community, you have an absolute obligation to give them 30 days' notice. And if you fail to do so, I will vote against each and every one of these applications.
Are there any additional questions?
Just a comment from me. I have to say, I couldn't agree more. I was not aware of that. I was not aware that so-called consultation happened on Friday. I will deal with this internally, Commissioner.
But just to be clear, we don't vote on these. They're just
No.
informational.
This is information.
But look,
It needs to be fixed. That's the point.
He and Miss Mayor have been working long and hard to try and persuade the public, and successfully so, that they are trying to do things for them. This is the kind of incident for 8 years that have been a situation where we ignore the public. And we really do. If you send it to them, that's pro forma. I suspect the mail doesn't even get there before the vote takes place. As somebody says repeatedly at the microphone after saying getting old isn't for sissies, somebody says it's time for a change.
I think we will move on to your standard reports, President Byford.
Okay, thank you, Madam Acting Chair. Welcome back to the chair. This month, board, we have committee, we have three standard follow-up reports. They are the MetroCard report, the third quarter transit recidivism report, and the third quarter NYCT and MTA bus EEO and diversity reports. All of those can be viewed in the TA committee book, but we do have Joel Andrews, my VP for Equal Opportunities, and Gwen Halston here to present the EEO and diversity reports. No.
Good afternoon. New York City Transit workforce of just over 52,000 continues to reflect significant racial and ethnic diversity, with people of color and white employees making up 78% and 22% of the workforce, respectively. More detailed information on New York City Transit's workforce demographics can be found in your committee materials. Of the almost 3,000 employees we hired between January 1st and September 30th of this year, men and women of color and women were hired at a higher rate than their percentage in the workforce at 84% and 22%, respectively. Women make up 19% of the workforce at New York City Transit, much lower than the 49% of employed women in the general New York City population. Recognizing the challenges that New York City Transit and MTA Bus Company faced in attracting women to many of the jobs that we perform at the agencies, we're working on many fronts to increase our female workforce. One of those include our HR recruitment team targeting its recruitment efforts at colleges and universities where the female enrollment is greater than 55%. Some of the examples of that would be Lehman, Hunter, and Brooklyn colleges. To increase our population of employees with disabilities, New York City Transit and MTA Bus Company has participated in a career fair sponsored by Abilities, Inc., which is an organization that prepares people with disabilities, with all types of disabilities, for entry or re-entry into the workforce. Regarding complaints that were handled internally by the department, of the almost 298 allegations of discrimination cited in the complaints we handled, 78 allegations, or 26%, were based on race and color discrimination. Over the past 5 years, race and color allegations have ranged from 22% to 26%. In comparison to the most recent federal and New York State statistics, New York City Transit's 26% is slightly less than the comparable allegations at the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which was 35.8% in 2017, and the New York State Division of Human Rights, where it was 33%. Regarding case closures and dispositions, between January 1st and September 30th, a total of 75 EEO internal investigations were closed by the department, with 36% of those cases decided in favor of the complaining employee or job applicant. A number of our high school to career efforts are underway, including the following. Following up on Dr. Susan Metzger's encouragement several years ago for us to build relationships with schools that are partnered with Board of Cooperative Education Services, or BOCES, we're happy to report that New York City Transit is working closely with Barry Technical High School, a Nassau County BOCES school, to ensure that automotive maintenance and electrical installation curricula prepare students for exams and entry-level operating positions at New York City Transit and MTA Bus Company, and we're working to establish similar relationships with BOCES programs in other counties. In furtherance of our career and technical education partnerships, a cross-departmental team visited 8 New York City Transit career and technical high schools to encourage high school seniors to apply for New York City Transit's electrical helper open competitive examination, and a total of 218 applications were submitted. 21 seniors from Barry Tech BOCE also submitted applications after we visited their school. We also continue to build and strengthen our internship program, which serves as a feeder for New York City Transit. Within the internship program, approximately 84% of the 136 students are minorities, 43% Asian, 24% African American, 17% Hispanic Latino, and we have a 42% female representation. In terms of training that we're doing at New York City Transit, 1,500 managers, beginning with President Byford and the executive team in May of 2018, and over 170 operating supervisors have completed unconscious bias and modeling inclusive behavior as part of our diversity and inclusion training. Finally, we have established 6 transit employee resource groups around shared interests or affinities. These groups, considered a diversity best practice for world-class organizations, are voluntary employee-led groups that serve as a resource for participants at New York City Transit and MTA Bus Company, and foster an inclusive work environment aligned with the company's mission and business objectives. The next step in the program is to identify executive sponsors to partner with the leadership of each of these employee resource groups to form a diversity council that will work to advance New York City Transit diversity and inclusion objectives. And that concludes my report.
Questions? Well, hearing none, I'll ask President Byford to make concluding remarks.
We have Gwen. Mr. Chair, we still have Gwen, who's just going to do a piece on MTA Bus EEO and diversity. Thank you.
Good afternoon. MTA Bus is strongly committed to creating an environment free from discrimination and harassment. Our values of equality, inclusion, and diversity support our vision of collaborative culture of respect and fairness of our employees, vendors, customers, and the communities we serve. Between January 1 and September 30th, 127 EEO and Title VI complaints citing 156 separate allegations were handled. MTA Bus disposed of 28 EEO complaints and 27 Title VI complaints. 4% of the Title VI complaints were decided in favor of the complainant, and 4% of the EEO complaints were resolved or settled. MTA Bus and New York City Transit partnered with New York City Department of Education to strengthen our high school to career efforts. This initiative assisted in developing work-ready graduates at career and technical education high schools. During 2018, the CTE, or Career and Technical Education High School partnership, consisted of 35 high school graduates from diverse backgrounds. Of the 35 participants, 14% are female, 43% are Hispanic, 31% Black, and 20% Asian. CTE graduates rotate through at least 3 bus depots while shadowing an experienced maintainer. MTA Bus and New York City Transit launched the Transit Mechanical Apprenticeship Program, TMA is what it's called, to increase minority and female representation in the skilled craft EEO job category. This program affords the CTE graduates an opportunity to work full-time as apprentices. In fact, in partnership with the union, MTA Bus provided opportunities for 5 internal maintainer helpers to participate in the TMA program. MTA participated in 8 veteran recruitment events. 1 was targeted for female veterans. And we also participated in 7 recruitment events geared toward those with disabilities. Thank you.
Are there any questions to Ms. Harleston? Mr. Merdler.
Let me make a suggestion. By the time an EEO complaint is filed, the positions of the parties is hardened. And what has worked successfully in some areas is an ombudsman with whom the parties can communicate before the last resort, which is an EEO complaint. I would suggest that we give some thought to that going forward, both in buses and in subways, as a potential way of limiting the number of cases where we have to go to the mat.
Suggestion, Mr. Merdler, is it widely known throughout your respective agencies that the EEO officer is available for counseling, for complaints prior to the actual filing of a complaint?
I would say certainly, for both agencies. And that has been increasingly so in recent years.
So short of a formal complaint, there is dialogue and conversation that oftentimes precedes that?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. In fact, the EEO and diversity team at the department at New York City Transit handles a significant number of allegations, complaints, requests for assistance that do not rise to the level of a violation. We treat those as what we call pre-complaints. They're matters where we provide assistance to employees, but they're not reported to the committee. And those takes up a substantial amount of the time of the employees. And so we see our team members as actually serving as ombudspersons for the agency.
And MTA Bus concurs with that process.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I'm going to ask President Byford to make some concluding reports on some outstanding items.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Chairman. So 2 outstanding items. One that we already alluded to, that was the question that was previously asked about fan plants that are undergoing repair or maintenance. So John O'Grady's already said we will get back to committee members with that. We're just finalizing the detail. And secondly, in response to Commissioner Metzger's comments, I plan to discuss efforts to improve diversity, building upon what we just heard with my counterpart, the other agency presidents in coming weeks. I've got that lined up for MD Hakim's next all-agency presidents meeting. And slightly unscripted, the third, it's a shame he's not here actually, on behalf of staff, we'd just like to thank Commissioner Greenberg for the always supportive work he's done on the board. Oh, he is still here. Right, so I'm glad you're still here. Thank you on behalf of staff. You've always given us, you've challenged where appropriate, but equally you've always been respectful and supportive of us, and we very much appreciate that. You'll always be welcome on the transit system, with the appropriate fare paid, of course.
You don't get a rebuttal, Mr. Greenberg. He's going to take it anyway.
Okay.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, may I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.